I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book, A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Miracle Voices. This is Matt McCabe, your co-host, here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Technical difficulties aside, they've all been cleared. Thank you, both of you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And our guest today is Rogier van Vlissingen. Roger, welcome to Miracle Voices.
Nice to be with you guys.
Roger, tell us where you're sitting in the world right now.
I am sitting on a fourth floor apartment in the Bronx.
Nice. Okay. And where are you from originally, Roger?
I am from Holland.
Okay. And I mean, New York City was originally called New Amsterdam. So was there some connection there? Family, lineage?
No, not that I know of, except that in a past life regression, I found that I've made this journey before.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, maybe we'll hear more about that later.
But wait. We're in the now. So where would that past life, what time period would that past life have brought you in that same journey?
Well, we never figured that out because we didn't get clear enough resolution, but it was more or less somewhere in the 17th century, probably, because by the nature of the dress and apparently I came over on a sailing ship, so it was something like that. And in other words, somehow this was in my blood.
Yeah.
Whatever, it just made sense to me that I should have done it before.
Yeah. Dutch East India Company?
Yeah,
Is that?
somewhere in that neighborhood,
Huh? And what age were you when you did it this time?
Oh, I was 28 when I moved here.
Okay, now I'm happy to integrate the rest with what you tell us. Thank you.
Well, no, I got a question here. Now, when you're doing the past life regression, do you see like a two-dimensional images with no sound, and you don't really get total control over what you see, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, it kind of stagnated at that point, but I saw myself in clothes that were from that sort of period. And I was having a dinner with people in some kind of a brownstone in Manhattan. And so it all made sense because I've been in and around the shipping business in this lifetime as well. And so, the image made sense, but it never developed. There was never a dialogue or anything like that. It was just I got to that image and it sort of clicked and then it faded out.
Yeah. Interesting.
I have a question, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what would make you ask if there was no audio in it?
Just kind of little experiences I've had where you see snippets of different times, but there's no sound at all. And you don't really have control over what you're looking at. It's just something being presented and that you really don't have context.
That's interesting. I've had that, but with full sound.
No
color.
Sound ever. Yeah, no sound ever.
I've had total sound. That's interesting. I never even thought one wouldn't have sound, but okay, thank you.
Yeah. We got to compare notes on this. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Roger.
Forgiveness.
Yeah. Tangent over.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Roger, can you tell us how A Course in Miracles came into your life?
Oh, well, of course I can. It's a funny story. I had a girlfriend in high school that we were deeply in love for 1 week. So it was an infatuation, I guess is the proper word. And then we just cracked ourselves up because we were so bloody different that it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. But we stayed friends, and for several years, if either one of us had some kind of a party and we wanted somebody to go with, we would go together and we would have tea in the city every once in a while and whatever. Anyway, she became a nurse. She was very, very Catholic as a young girl. And I was studying all these weird things like, Advaita and you name it. And so, like I say, it just wasn't a match on a lot of levels. And then later she married somebody who worked for Shell and she ends up living all over the world. And for some reason, in 90, at the end of 90 or early 91, she's in Holland for some family visit, whatever. And I have to go to Holland because my mother was very ill. And she and I somehow got together where she lived. And at the time, she, like I say, had been living all over the world and told me the story of how she was in Indonesia in some Buddhist temple. She had sampled all the religions of the world. And finally, in this Buddhist temple, she had a vision of what she thought was Jesus. And the way she described it, it all sounded very, very real to me. And then she went on and joined some kind of a charismatic Catholic organization. So she went back to the faith of her childhood. And she was very involved with Mother Teresa, I remember at the time. And anyway, when we said our goodbyes, she said, and I had just a few years before, I had been fired from a fairly significant career. And so on my way out, she says to me, and if you ever want to look into some stuff, read Jerry Jampolsky's Teach Only Love. Well, guess what? That spring, I am working with a friend of mine. We were actually painting a fence on an estate on Long Island somehow. And we were talking, and I end up going to a bookstore and look up this book. I remember the title and the author, Jerry Jampolsky, Teach Only Love. Yeah, they had it in Westport, Connecticut. That was. I lived in Norwalk. And so I go home with Jerry Jampolsky, and I would say in May and June, I read everything Jerry Jampolsky wrote. And as we all know on this line, Jerry keeps quoting from this strange book called The Course in Miracles. And so at the end of that, I'm like wondering, well, if he quotes from this Course in Miracles all the time, maybe I should go find that book. So I went back to the store and got the Course in Miracles, and I sort of sniffed at it, and I was very suspicious and very doubtful. I was clearly looking for a new direction in my life, but I wasn't interested in any detours. And so I, at one point at the end of June, went to bed with a very serious prayer to know if this was really Jesus talking to me. Now, I should insert something. In 1980, what is this, 91? 1987, I think, my a spiritual teacher of mine died who I had been with from probably age 15 to age 40. And I was very pissed with God, and I had a dream that night, which was very vivid, and I rarely dream anything at all. So all of a sudden in my dream, I was coming home from Amsterdam on the train, and it was late at night, and there was no direct train. I had to go via Utrecht, which is the central station in Holland. And so I go to Utrecht, but my train is delayed, and it turns out that the connecting train has already left. And it's now the middle of the night. There is no other train until the next morning, and I'm standing there on the deserted platform in the city of Utrecht, not knowing what to do. And that's when I wake up. So it was very, very disconcerting, let's say the least. In the aftermath of that dream, I somehow knew that something would come up in another form. It's just that my teacher had died, but there would be another continuation in a different form. And lo and behold, that night, when I went to bed with my prayer about was the Course the real thing, I had a dream, and that was 4 years later. That was 91, from 87 to 91. In that dream, I was standing on the platform in Utrecht exactly as I'd left it 4 years earlier, and my connecting train pulls in. And that was all I needed to know. The Course was my connecting train. End of story. In the month of July, I read the Course daily. I would have breakfast, turn on my espresso machine, and I would have espressos and read the Course, one chapter a day, 31 days in July. And so by the end of July, I had read the text. That was the start of the Course. And in September of that year, I did my first workshop with Ken Wapnick.
Yeah. Leave it to a Dutchman to have a dream about like infrastructure. There's all these jokes on YouTube about how good the infrastructure is in Holland. It's like the best in the world, bike paths underneath train overpasses and all these things. And so you got exactly what you needed there, the key for your lock. And people are always really interested in what it was like to go to Ken Wapnick's classes and interface with him. What were your kind of big learnings or takeaways in being with Ken?
What can I say? I mean, I ended up until they left for Temecula, which was in 1999. I probably was there 6 times a year or something on the average, and so I did Saturday classes, I did 1 week classes, I did weekend classes, whatever. So I was very deeply involved, and only thing I can say is that to me, Ken completely embodied the Course. I have never heard him say anything, that is other than explaining the Course with the Course. You know what I mean? He totally was the Course, and that was what I needed. So no question, there's not much you can say about that. If you want the Course pure, go to Ken Wapnick.
I have a question.
Yes.
And you're no question. Who was the teacher that you had before? What tradition? What was he teaching you?
Well, so the people that I grew up with, which first one, you missed this piece. I was talking to Matt. What I'm going through right now is a book just came out about a lady in Holland who was a channeler and of what I consider to be Jesus, though she never used that name. She always spoke to me of God's help. But if you read Hebrew like you do, the name Jesus means God helps or God's help or whichever way you want to put it. So she just used an abstract term. And so she was very much inspired by Krishnamurti, although she, in her parlance, she was more in Christian terms. But Krishnamurti was a great experience. She was present at the Truth is a Pathless Land speech in 29. She died probably when I was 17 or 18. I can't remember exactly, 16 maybe. And I had stopped having contact with her because she was having health problems, etc. And at that time, I met this other man. His name is Fritz Bonk. And they knew each other. And Fritz also was a student of Krishnamurti. And there was another Dutch author who did a lot of work in terms of explaining the spiritual meaning of Jesus. So Fritz Bonk was the one who was really my teacher, and he also channeled what I think was Jesus. And so he was my spiritual teacher from about age 15 till about age 40, died in 87, and he was inspired by Krishnamurti, and for me that he was my go-to guy, and we both studied this author Jan Willem Kaiser, whose work I have sometimes translated or some of it, and that was it. So that was who fell away in 87, and then 4 years later I picked up the course. But to me, the course was a continuation of my contact with Jesus, and of course, as we all know, the course is much more about we can all directly connect with our own inner teacher. Although they always said that, both this lady, Miss Hofmans, and Fritz Bonk said that all God's children can always connect to the help, but it's often not an easy thing to do. We're too involved. We're too much in the world and whatever, So it's some garbage needs to be cleaned out before you can start to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Good point. A lot of garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Which I was always taught, even as a toddler, it was explained to me by this lady that God's help is available to all God's children. She was always clear that we didn't need her to ask a question. You could do it yourself, except the condition is that you let go of your idea of what the outcome should look like. So God was not like Santa Claus. God was, if you want to ask me, then you need to accept what I give you. And it may look a little different than what you thought it was going to look like.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Let go of outcomes and ideas.
Exactly.
Turn out way better than you think. Yeah. Sometimes a little scary, but better.
A friend of mine just recently had a realization when she was kind of talking to her inner God and said, well, why can't I do it this way? And God said, because I'm better than you. And she went, yeah, I guess you are. Okay. I really love that.
That will settle it. That will settle.
Yes. Totally settles it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Roger, we'd love to hear your forgiveness story.
I guess the major forgiveness story for me is with my father, which I guess is not uncommon. He was a psychiatrist and very spiritual in his way. He was very early in completely rejecting any psychopharmaca. So in actuality, he practiced more or less as a Jungian therapist more than as a psychiatrist. He resisted the medicalization of psychiatry. So that was an interesting thing. He was talk therapy only, even then in the 50s. And I would say he always hoped that I would follow in his footsteps, although he didn't tell me that in so many words until much later. But growing up, we had a very, very competitive relationship. He would take offense if I read books that he wanted to read, but he couldn't read. And he would get all frustrated and see this as a competitive threat almost. And I think as a child, I was also difficult to manage. And if he had killed me, he should be forgiven because I was pretty tough. But as it was, at one point, he was chasing me up the stairs, and he would have beat me with a massive rope that he used for that purpose. And except I'd had enough, and I threatened him with an axe and a saw, and he was coming up the stairs after me, and I I absolutely had no question. If you do one more step, I'll kill you, and I would have. It was that extreme. So it was a very difficult relationship. Then my parents got divorced. My father moved out, and I always kept contact with him, which is funny because I had a good friend who had a very tumultuous relationship with his father. He was a little older than I was, and he always said to me, said, keep visiting your father, because if you don't, you will regret it when he dies. So once a year, I would go and visit my father in his new abode with his new wife. And funnily enough, I would come in, he would ask me, what did I take in my coffee? Which the answer invariably was nothing. And I would sit down and drink the coffee. And when the coffee was finished, I would go because there was no conversation. We could not talk. So he died in 84. I'm here. But we had in common this connection to one spiritual teacher, this man, Jan Willem Kaiser, who I mentioned. And I always read this guy's book. And somehow in the late, what was it? Yeah, mid 90s, I got the idea of translating his books. And I ended up publishing one. And during the work on that book, which I believe was in the Christmas period of 2002, I became acutely aware of how, both for my father and me, this particular author had been really a guide. And so, as I am writing this book about this author, I am thinking a lot about my father. And in that period, I suddenly had a profound forgiveness experience with my father. And it was, like I say, as if we were connected through this joint interest in this particular author. And I suddenly understood he didn't necessarily want me to be a psychiatrist, but he wanted me to be a healer, because that's what he wanted to be. Psychiatrist was just a form that this has taken for him. And there was a total reconciliation in the moment that I realized that that was the mission, to be a healer. And so that was the forgiveness moment, and that was confirmed to me 2 days later. I had lunch with a lady who, she and her husband had helped me a little bit with the book. And when I gave her a copy of the printed book, she has a problem with her eyes. She couldn't read, but she's clairvoyant. And the minute she had the book in her hands, she said, you know, your father is very much around you, and he's very interested in what you're doing. Hello. I mean, you know, I hadn't said anything. That just spontaneously, she saw that. And it just totally confirmed the intense forgiveness experience that I had felt with my father. So there you go. That's I think the key story.
Hmm. Did you have any other contact with the clairvoyant woman?
Yeah. She was somebody I knew. She was actually another student of Ken Wapnick's.
Ah, okay. And so it was like this shift of a recontextualization of the grievance with your dad, where you saw so what you guys both thought were just miscommunicating on the point, healer versus job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And in that you were able to unlock and see forgiveness all the way through, all the way
Yeah,
to,
absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Did it feel like a weight off your back?
Oh, totally. It melted. Just right there.
Yeah.
Total on the floor.
Yeah.
And what became of that next once that was melted?
I wiped it up.
I love that. You were free.
Yeah.
You were free.
Yes,
Love.
exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. It's and so and that got it, in the course it says what forgiveness says that what I thought my brother did has not occurred. And in that one moment you were able to see it through that recontextualization all the way back that this didn't even happen.
I think completely, because I felt that a lot of the tension was his expectation that I was going to become a psychiatrist, and which I didn't do. And but then when my understanding suddenly flipped into, oh, his aspiration was to become a healer, just being a psychiatrist was his way of getting there. It was the worldly form that he needed to get there, but that form wasn't necessary. So all of a sudden it all made sense, and the whole thing collapsed into one, and I felt nothing else but total love in that moment. It was gone. Like I say, it was completely, it fell away.
And in the competition that he engaged with you in, what do you think that part was about? Like, I'm just looking like, what if you did choose to be a healer? What sparked the competition?
Well,
You were a reflection of him that he had to.
yes, absolutely. I think that's very just simple son-father stuff, and that's just the form it took for us. That A, he wanted me to become like him and preferably better than him. B, if there was any sign of me getting any ahead of him on any topic whatsoever, he would. I found this out after my parents were divorced, that he would complain to her about me reading books that he hadn't read yet.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to ask. So, where was your mother in this picture? Did you go to her? Was she alive for you to go to her for any kind of confirmation? Was there, not that there needed to be? I mean, forgiveness and healing was complete. You had one confirmation of a clairvoyant, but was there anything from your mother?
Okay, so what you got to understand is that my parents got divorced probably when I was 16 or 17 or thereabouts.
Right.
So after that, I ended up living with my mother, and so during those years, I learned some of the stories that I didn't know while they were going on, but retrospectively, then all of a sudden they made sense. And so I was obviously aware of the conflict with my father, although after that big confrontation that we had, uh, then he never again really became physical about it. He knew enough that was not a good idea.
Right.
And so, but the the competitive tension remained. And so that it was a very ambivalent thing. He had expectations of me that he wasn't really speaking about. And at the same time, he was competitive with me when he saw that I was studying stuff that he wanted to study, but he didn't have time to do.
Yeah.
Like I can remember, like once a year he would consult an astrologer when he had a tough situation with a patient. And I began studying astrology because these astrologers came over for lunch and dinner, and we knew these people and we talked about the whole thing, and I got very interested. And I mean, I was studying Greek mythology when I was 10, and so I became deeply interested in astrology. And the author who we shared an interest in, Kaiser, he was a very, very accomplished astrologer. So there was a lot of interest in astrology, but when I started reading stuff that he couldn't, then he was very jealous of me. So just to say that on an ego level, there was plenty of tension in the air during our lifetimes, and it apparently never got resolved during his lifetime, because as I told you, I visited him once a year. And then I was 28 and I left for the States. So I had about 10 years of these annual visits during which absolutely nothing was said. The only thing I remember from those years was we were both at the same time in 1975 reading Ivan Illich's Medical Nemesis, and we both said it was great, but then we couldn't talk about it either.
Mm.
This is like the Dutch version of Archie Bunker or All in the Family or something. Okay. So there's this realization for you that this has nothing to do with the physical bodies at all. And it's something in the mind, like the mind is using the bodies and the relationships as an explanation, but there's really some grievance out of awareness that's causing this. And you have this kind of insight.
Yeah, I would say so. Like I say, the biggest clue to all of that was the very fact that I had that profound forgiveness experience with him when he was no longer with us in form.
Yeah.
And that was such a dramatic lesson of it has nothing to do with the physical body.
Yeah.
And the funniest part was that my sister at one point contacted me, and my sister and I are like fire and water, and we always have what I call these ice ages when she doesn't talk to me. But anyway, so at some point, I can't remember exactly, but she contacted me and she wanted to know something about my father. And she said, well, you went and visited him. I already lived here, and so I got a letter. And I said, well, you think I visited him, but believe it or not, we couldn't have a conversation. So I would have my cup of coffee and leave because there was nothing to talk about. And so there's very little that I can probably tell you that might be useful to you. But then we got into a conversation, and I come to find out, I said, oh, I know what happened. When father died, you got pissed off and you went out and you got pregnant, and now this child is going to be born, and you don't want to have this stinking corpse in the corner of the room when you're giving birth to your child. And that was exactly right. I figured it out absolutely accurately. And so that's why she wanted to know about my father, but I couldn't really tell her very much at that time.
What a visual there. Yeah.
You have siblings?
What?
You have siblings?
Yeah, I had two sisters. I'm the oldest, and it's 2.5 years between. The youngest one was somewhat, mentally handicapped, not quite autistic. There was never an accurate diagnosis that all of the experts could agree on. And however, she still lived at home with us, and she had her own ways of being very, very perceptive in ways that I understood then, but I understand it even better now. I don't know if you guys have listened to the telepathy tapes, but it gets very interesting with these autistic people that clearly are in touch at another level. And my recollection of my little sister was that, number one, she was the centrifugal force that kept the family together when otherwise we might have blown apart much sooner, because we were all geared to helping her and supporting her. And the funniest thing also was that she absolutely knew the minute anybody entered the room if that person was to be trusted or not. And she would completely shut down if nasty people came in the room. And we had one case in the family of my father's mother, who came once a year, and the kid would shut down and cry all day long. And this woman was very, very difficult, unbelievable. And so she was completely accurate. I mean, to give you some idea, this woman had held up correspondence from my father's father. My father's father and his mother got divorced when he was about 7, and his father had written to him, "My father, at the end of the Second World War, met a Canadian soldier, and as they were talking, the Canadian said, 'Oh, I was just in Brussels, and I met a gentleman with the same last name as you.'" And he pulls out the business card, and my father says, "Oh, that's my father." And my father somehow organized a train ticket to go down to Brussels and visit his father. And in 1945, he finds out that his father had been writing to him all these years, but his mother was intercepting all the letters because she wanted no contact between my father and his father. So that gives you some idea about the extremes of ego behaviors.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So then I got to know my grandfather, and he was a very loving presence in my life in my early years. He died when I was 4 years old, before our family moved from Utrecht to Rotterdam, which happened in 1955. But yeah, that's the story.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Roger, when you get stuck in an ego storm and it seems like everything you've learned is just out the window, is there anything you can recommend practically that you do to get back on track?
Yeah, I would say, when it's those moments when you know you're stuck like a dog with a bone and you can't let go of it. You can only see things one way, and you know that it ain't the truth. And so one thing is simply just screaming for help. You know, that's easy enough. If it's more persistent than that, I like to reread some of Ken's stuff about the steps of the forgiveness process, something like that, and really meditate on that. And then usually the thing dissolves itself. And a day later, you don't know why you were even upset, but whatever.
Okay, that's great. And Roger, what is your favorite comfort food?
Oh, now you got to get ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
We're ready.
Yeah, born ready for this. Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a cook. Okay, when I was a kid, I always came in from school through the kitchen, and there would be people working on preparing a meal, and I would like to help out in the kitchen. I was always interested in cooking. And so since 10 years, I have become a practitioner of what's called a whole food plant-based diet. And one of the things that I've been busy with is recreating some of my favorite dishes. And one of them is a Dutch soup that's made with brown bones, but it's a variety of bones that doesn't exist here. Like pinto beans. It's similar to that, but anyway, I tried to make it one year. I brought in some fresh from Holland or dried, but anyway, and then I tried 11 different varieties here, whatever. So I got that whole recipe down. But my favorite recipe is actually Belgian endives. And when I was a kid, my mother made it with a cheese sauce. But in my current practice, I don't do cheese anymore. But I've learned to make a sauce that's even better than the jam cheese sauce that I used to get as a kid. And so it's a sauce that's made with chickpea flour, with nutritional yeast, black salt, and I put some turmeric in there. And the bloody thing is out of this world. And so I make it as an oven dish. I pre-cook the endives a little bit, and then I cover it with the sauce, and I put some panko bread flakes on top. And bingo, that goes in the oven, and it just is absolutely finger-licking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that they say what the black pepper kind of activates or makes the turmeric usable.
Right.
If only it had a little cream.
Well, that's not plant-based, but
we don't do cream. We don't do cream.
No, like it make yes, that's where I got left out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you could make it creamy. Like
definitely. Listen. I have a friend here who comes over once in a while on a Sunday for lunch, and he is one of those carnivore people, and I always have fun making something. And he said, "Oh my God, if I knew it was this way, I could become plant-based." I said, "Well, there you go,
Yeah.
And that comes in part from, I like to eat, so I make good stuff anyway, but also I've done cooking classes at the local church for many years. So I teach this whole food plant-based stuff to other people. So I'm very, very deeply involved.
Oh, that's great.
Really
that's great.
Yeah, I am all for plant-based food as long as it doesn't have the same name as the food that's not.
You're saying like don't have a mushroom burger?
Yeah, no. You could have a mushroom burger, but don't call like a creme brulee. That's if you're making
exactly.
You call it a creme brulee, it really screws up with my brain.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Yeah, you just make bloody good food, and
then
call it what it is. That's it.
Then I love it. Just don't make me expect something that has something yummy.
Oh, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree.
Especially if it's creamy. Tam does not want to be faked out.
No, it can be creamy. Just don't
have the word cream in it.
It's different than heavy cream. There's
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Or whipped cream. Like I really love whipped kind of coconut cream.
Yeah.
It's cream. But they're, as long as it's differentiated, my brain will accept it and open. Now, that must tell you something about me and my own forgiveness exercises. Like, just don't call it that. Let's be honest.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree. That's because of the culture we're in. The marketing people are trying to get people to accept something different, but it's screwy and it's misleading and it's annoying. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So for some of us, it backfires.
Well, Roger, thanks so much for coming on Miracle Voices and sharing your miracle voice. Is there any way or anywhere you want to point people to connect with you, or just go back to your normal life without?
Well, it's like, I have a site for my book, which is called ACIM letter N, and then Thomas. So the book is called Closing the Circle. Persha's Gospel of Thomas and A Course in Miracles. And the website is ACIM letter N THOMAS.com. And so that's an easy place to find me. Plus, I guess I'm active on Substack.
Okay.
That's about it,
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you so
very
much.
Nice to be with you guys.
Same, Roger. Thanks again. Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote, "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."